Good evening, everyone. I'm Anne Gilliland, Associate Dean for Information Studies in the UCLA School of Education and Information Studies. We have a new name this quarter. I'd like to welcome you all here today to the annual Kenneth Karmiole Lecture in Archival Studies. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge on behalf of the school and the Department of Information Studies, our presence here today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. As a land-grant institution, we pay our respect to their ancestors, elders, and relations, past, present, and emerging. In a moment, I'm going to turn the podium over to my colleague, Professor Michelle Caswell, to introduce our speaker. But before I do, I'd like to take a moment to thank our dear friend and funder of this lecture series, Kenneth Karmiole, for his steadfast and visionary support, not only of this lecture series, which has been going on now for several years, but also for scholarships that support our students in information studies, and many other events and funds that he has established at UCLA and elsewhere around Southern California to support archives, manuscripts, and rare book work and the professions and institutions that engage in them. Thank you, Ken. I can't see you, but I'm hoping that you're there. I'd also like to recognize and to thank the staff of the school's External Relations Office for all their help in putting together tonight's program. This is the first time that we have met virtually for this particular lecture, and even though it is in virtual format, there's still quite a lot of work that goes into putting a program together. And I'd also like to thank my colleagues in archival studies and more widely in information studies, who each year come together to select the speaker for the annual lecture. Finally, I would really like to thank Professor Jennifer Douglas for presenting this lecture to us this evening. Her work is much read and admired and influential across the field of archival studies, and very much so within our own Department of Information Studies. We'd really hope to be able to entertain her in warm and sunny Southern California, but unfortunately that was not possible. But I am delighted she's still able to present to us this evening. As or in the process of giving her lecture, a Q&A button will come up on your screen. If you wish to ask Professor Douglas a question, we will be catching the questions, and at the end of her lecture, I will be reading through them and she will be able to respond to each of your questions at that point. So I'm going to turn the podium over now to Professor Michelle Caswell. I'm feeling with this audience, she probably doesn't need too much introduction, but she is, of course, one of the most distinguished and insightful scholars herself in the field of archival studies. So she will be introducing Professor Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Anne. Thanks everyone for joining us so much over Zoom. I'm delighted to introduce my dear friend, Professor Jennifer Douglas tonight. Jennifer Douglas lives and works on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. She's an assistant professor at the School of Information at the University of British Columbia, where she teaches courses on arrangement and description, personal and community archives, and archival research and scholarship. Her research focuses on the roles of record creation and keeping in the intimate and emotional lives of individuals and communities, and on archivists' responsibilities to support, represent, and make space for these roles. Currently, she's the principal investigator on 2 research projects funded by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The first project explores the relationships between records work and grief work. An article written with 2 research assistants about the findings of this project was awarded the 2020 Archivaria W.K. Lamb Prize for the article that most advances archival research and scholarship in Canada. Douglas's second ongoing project focuses on acts of personal records creation and keeping, and seeks to identify and establish a person-centered theory of archival care. She has published articles that explore and critique the principles of provenance, particularly in the context of personal archives. Her article on original order in Writers' Archives was awarded the 2014 W.K. Lamb Prize from Archivaria, and her doctoral dissertation won the iSchool's Dissertation Award in 2013. She is currently working on developing a book project, a much anticipated book, that will expand on the archive stories her talk begins to tell tonight. Professor Douglas's work on the personal emotional impact of records creation and use has been greatly influential to me and to the work of my students. So I'm so excited to hear her speak tonight, and I'll hand it over to Professor Douglas now.
Hi. First of all, I can't tell if anybody can hear me because I can't see anyone, but first of all, I want to say thank you to Michelle for the really thoughtful introduction, to Anne for the invitation to talk tonight, and to Kenneth Karmiole for making this really terrific yearly event possible. I'm going to share my screen with you. Just take a second here. Okay, so this talk is titled The Pink Room and Other Archive Stories. And before I begin my talk, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. As Michelle said, I work and live on the Musqueam territory, and I want to express my thanks to the Musqueam Nation for their hospitality. I also want to acknowledge how privileged I am right now as an academic who is also a mother to be living in a place where there has been a reasonable and effective COVID-19 management plan in place since the beginning of the pandemic. While my children were at home with me for 5 months, they've been back in school since September, and it's only because this is possible for us as a family that it was possible for me as a scholar to carve out the time it took to prepare this talk amidst all my other teaching, research, and service roles. I shouldn't have to describe this as a privilege, it should be a given, but right now it isn't, and I think it's crucial to acknowledge these current inequities in scholarship. I have reliable childcare, and it allows me to work in particular ways that I know are no longer available to my colleagues in other cities and countries. To those colleagues, I say, I see you, I support you, and I'm mad as hell that the real support you need is not available to you. Even with some reliable support systems in place, it has not been an easy time for many of us to think deeply, imaginatively, creatively. We're living in a time of enormous stress and of mass grieving. I think there's no doubt right now that most of us are experiencing emotions that, depending on our circumstances, range from profound and all-encompassing grief to a more general sense of loss for people we love, for places we miss, even for routines we never knew we depended on so deeply. This talk is grounded in grief. At its center is a mother's experience of the death of her child. This is where the archive stories I want to tell today are rooted, but as I wrote in the abstract for this talk, it's hard to know exactly where to begin in telling them. I might begin in 1981 when Lara Gilbert's diaries begin, or I might begin in 1999 when her mother, Carol Itter, first exhibited The Pink Room. I could begin in 2018 when I first started my research on the Lara Gilbert phone, or later that year when I first met Carol Itter in person. Wherever this story begins, it is also a story about relationships, the often intimate relationships that form in, through, and around archives. Relationships between a mother's archives and a daughter's archives, between the living and the dead, between a researcher and the subjects of her research. This will also be a story about records creation and about the things that records do, the things that people do with them. Some folks might dispute this, but I don't think we know very much as a profession and a discipline about creation in the context of personal and especially intimate archives. I don't think we know a lot, or we certainly haven't articulated what we know about how and why people create personal records, what they do with them, why they keep them, why they or their kin want them preserved in archival repositories. We've tended, like so many of the researchers who use personal archives, to treat them as source material, the flotsam of a life lived, pieces that can be patched together to tell a story about their creator's life, or give insight into how the creator's work developed and evolved, or provide general information about a time and place, what life was like then. As researchers in personal archives, Marianne DeVere, Sally Newman, and Anne Vickery address the question of how to read the intimate archive, which they define as collections of private and in some cases highly personal papers that have found their way into public collections. This talk is also an exercise in how to read an intimate archive. Reading suggests a text, and here I want to position the archive itself as a text. Heather McNeil has argued that conceptualizing an archival fond as a whole, as text, has useful purposes. In particular, viewing the archival collection as an assembled whole, as a kind of text, requires us to realize that the nature of fond should not be taken as given, that archivists and archival institutions must consider how they came to be produced, isolated, and presented to attention. In other words, we need to pay attention to how the archive was created, to the various intentions, motivations, decisions, actions, and accidents that shaped it as a whole. Second, McNeil suggests, viewing the archive as a text marks its meaning, or rather meanings, as a problem worth exploring. A text makes an argument. It has a rhetorical purpose. And considering an archive as a text requires us also to consider what the text and its author is trying to tell us. Here is what I want to get at in this talk, which is a kind of case study really on archival creation, on the creation of an archival text, or many archival texts really, and on the telling of archive stories. In this talk, I want to consider and position a personal archive not only as a source for telling stories, but also as a mode of storytelling in its own right. The archives we start with are the Lara Gilbert archives, or the Lara Gilbert fond as it is known, using the word fond as Canadian archivists do to denote the whole of the records of an individual. The fond consists largely of Gilbert's journals. The earliest journal in the collection was begun in 1981 when Lara was 9. The final entry in the last journal is written just a few days before Gilbert died in October 1995 at the age of 22. Gilbert's mother donated her records to the University of Victoria archives in 2006. I first encountered the Lara Gilbert fond as part of my current research project, which explores the relationships between record keeping and grief work. I've been interested in this work in how record keeping might provide a means for the bereaved to maintain an important and healthy connection with those they mourn, and how the donation of private and personal archival materials to public repositories might be understood as a way of continuing the social existence of the dead. I'd put out a call on Twitter asking for leads on what I was calling bereavement collections, which I defined as collections that have been notably shaped by the grief experiences of their creator. Lara Wilson, the archivist at the University of Victoria Archives in Victoria, British Columbia, emailed me to tell me I might be interested in the Lara Gilbert fond. And indeed, after reading the finding aid, I was. I arranged to take a research trip to Victoria with my research assistant, Alex Alasevskis. It's fair to say, I think, that Alex and I went into the University of Victoria archives prepared for a difficult experience and emerged in a state of near shock. The Lara Gilbert phone had a profound effect on both of us. And in part, what I want to think about tonight is how that effect was arranged, how the archive was deployed to achieve this effect. In our work exploring the relationship between record keeping and grief work, Alex and I, along with another research assistant, Devin Mordell, have articulated a concept we call records work to account for the multiplicity of ways individuals create, collect, and care for documentary and other materials by and about their loved ones and as part of a grieving process. The concept of records work is intended to foreground the ways that individuals interact with and mobilize records to various ends. Tonight, I want to explore the various ways in which Carol Itter engages in records work, the different ways she mobilizes records, her daughters and her own, toward particular ends connected to grief, to love, and to justice. First, I should tell you a little bit more about Lara Gilbert and her archives. I'm going to introduce you to Lara the way I first met her, first through the biographical sketch and the finding aid Wilson pointed me to, and then through her own records. The biographical sketch and the finding aid, which has since been substantially revised, read, Lara Gilbert, Catherine Grace Lara Leanne Gilbert, was born in Burnaby, British Columbia on November 26, 1972. Her mother is Vancouver artist Carol Itter, whose sculptural installation, The Pink Room, A Visual Requiem, was acquired by the Vancouver Art Gallery in 2007. Gilbert grew up in Vancouver's Strathcona and downtown Eastside neighborhoods. Described as a solitary child, she excelled academically and earned academic awards at the elementary, secondary, and post-secondary levels. She was considered a gifted writer from an early age. She began journal writing at approximately 8 years old and continued writing until her death at age 22. She also attended Lord Strathcona Elementary School, Britannia High School, and the University of British Columbia, where she earned an honors degree in biochemistry. Following the completion of undergraduate studies, she applied unsuccessfully to a number of Canadian medical schools. The biographical sketch went on to explain that while continuing with her studies, Gilbert suffered from mental illness and underwent various treatments, including prescription medication, talk therapy, and psychiatric ward admission with electroshock therapy. On a few occasions, the finding aid noted, she returned to the downtown east side and experimented with street drugs. Following many suicide attempts, Gilbert died from an intentional pharmaceutical drug overdose, October 7th, 1995. This biographical sketch provided Alex and I with some sense that the materials within the phone might be hard to work with and would certainly be personal and sensitive. When I talked to Lara Wilson, the archivist, I noted that the phone was unusual in that we don't often see the records of a young woman, unknown except to her family and friends, acquired by a university archives. Wilson agreed and told me that Lara Gilbert's mother had really wanted there to be a record of a young girl's childhood, and also a record of how a young girl experienced depression and mental illness. Itter had believed that her daughter's story mattered, that it deserved to be preserved, and that it had something to communicate to others. Her daughter's story turned out to be more than Alex and I had bargained for. And here's where I want to warn you that I'm going to be referring again to mental illness and suicide, as well as to sexual abuse. I won't be talking in any kind of detail about these experiences, but if they are triggering to you, please take care of yourself as you need to. As I mentioned, Alex and I were prepared for the phone to contain difficult material, having understood from the biographical sketch that Lara Gilbert had experienced mental illness and suicide, and we knew the journals contained a draft of a suicide note. Our research began as most archival research does. 2 big banker's boxes were brought out to us and we quietly began to work through files. The first files contained Lara Gilbert's childhood diaries, including the one with the line I quoted in the abstract to this talk. "Do not look in here. This is my diary. This is Lara Gilbert's life." It was easy to feel like trespassers in these papers, but we also knew that Gilbert's mother wanted them read, that she wanted people to see what kind of girl her daughter had been. That girl was only a couple of years older than I am, and she wrote in the same kinds of diaries I used as a kid and teenager. She wrote about her love of Michael Jackson, about school and friends, and as she grew a little older, about homework and crushes on boys. Lots of them were named Michael. It was all very familiar. But then there were some passages that left us feeling concern and trepidation. She wrote about feeling uncomfortable at her dad's house, about a growing sense of anxiety and fear. She began to write about hating herself and feeling depressed, and to refer to self-harming behaviors, and finally to the recovery of suppressed memories of sexual abuse by close family members. Her depression deepened, and she was horrified by the memories that were surfacing. Always, Lara tried to help herself. She used her diary as a space to record her moods, what helped and what didn't, and to talk herself through very bad times. She took herself to the emergency room and she recognized she was a danger to herself. She sought therapy and benefited from talking to psychiatrists and therapists. Lara Gilbert worked very hard to stay alive, though she also attempted suicide several times. She frequently checked herself into the hospital and at times was committed for her own safety. During one of these hospitalizations, she was sexually assaulted by a hospital orderly. Eventually, this man was brought to trial where Lara had to testify against him. He was found not guilty. Through all of this, Lara completed her degree at UBC and in her final year applied to medical schools. Not very long after the sexual assault trial, which ended in a not guilty finding, Gilbert learned she had not been accepted to any of the medical schools she'd applied to. Her journals in these months attest to the huge strain she was under and the enormous effort she was making to keep herself alive. She wrote about not wanting to be selfish, about needing to stay alive for her mother, her friends, and her boyfriend. But she also wrote about how much pain she was in and how incapable she was of believing that she could move past that pain. As a child, Gilbert had believed in a land she called Kawiaki. In the story she told herself about this land, she was Aisha, a being sent to Earth to live with humans by the Kawiaki god Goshiba. Eventually, she felt, she was bound to return to her real home. In her last months, Lara recognized how this story must have provided her with some sense of safety in the midst of the trauma of her childhood, as well as with the possibility of escape from that childhood. In the later journals, she sometimes wrote about feeling called back to Kawiaki. Her mother has said that some of Lara's final words were a wish to return to this land where she was safe. Lara's journal ends on September 28, 1995. In the published journal, its editor adds a final note. On the evening of October 7, 1995, while on a weekend pass from the psychiatric ward, Lara was returned to the hospital suffering from an overdose of medication. Resuscitation was attempted and failed. This was the full story contained in the archives, just barely hinted at in its finding aid. And perhaps contained is not the right word here at all. This is the story the archive is meant not to contain, but rather to release. Alex and I at first felt like we should have heeded Lara's warning to stay out, that we were seeing things we were not supposed to see. It was unbelievably sad and profoundly uncomfortable to work through the files in the first banker's box, slowly uncovering the extent of what had happened to Lara, what she'd endured. I found it especially difficult to be so close in age to her, to be at my own undergraduate school again after a long time away and reading about Lara's experiences at the university where I now work. There were so many things about me and Lara that were similar, so many experiences we shared, and of course, so many we did not. It's a cliche, isn't it, to talk about researchers emerging from the basement of the archives, blinking in the sunlight, but that is literally what Alex and I did, walking shell-shocked and quiet over to the Student Union building for lunch, thinking about Lara, her story, and asking ourselves whether we had any right to be privy to it. Her mother wanted it here, we said. This was a kind of bottom line. Carol Itter very deliberately made sure the material was preserved and placed in a public archives. She wanted people to see it. She wanted Lara's story told. With this publicizing instinct in mind, I'm going to shift my attention now to Carol's intentions and to 3 different ways she interacted with and mobilized Lara Gilbert's records to tell her story. Carol Itter is an artist who's worked in photography, poetry, sculpture, installation, and filmmaking since the 1960s in Vancouver. The works she's best known for are large-scale assemblages of found and collected objects, including recycled industrial materials, objects discarded in the lanes and alleyways of her downtown neighborhood, and natural materials collected along the shores of the Burrard Inlet. In this work-in-progress image here of one of Itter's favorite assemblages, Winter Garden, which was sadly destroyed by a fire in Itter's studio, you can get a sense of the scale, process, and recycled industrial materials she would collect and use to construct these large immersive artworks. In a 1989 text where she describes her art practice, Itter calls herself an assemblagist, a collector, a recycler who hauls something home, trusting that it will be useful somewhere, somehow, sometime. Itter's assemblages were often intended to make a statement, as art critic and curator Robin Lawrence notes, about our society's addiction to overconsumption and the environmental degradation that is its consequence. In the 3 examples I'm going to look at, examples of Itter's records work, we can see this assemblagist impulse put to use with new materials, archival materials, and new purposes, as an outlet for grief, as a means of letting Lara speak her truth, and as a demand for justice Lara did not receive during her lifetime. So the first archival intervention or assemblage I want to talk about is the Pink Room. When her daughter died, and for a long time after, Carol Itter felt a mind-numbing grief, a grief that she told the critic Lawrence in an interview knocked her flat, physically, emotionally, and creatively. Itter described to Lawrence how she just sat or lay down for a long, long time. She remembers that during this period, she could walk past evidence of her own art making and not comprehend how she was related to it. I couldn't touch it, couldn't look at it, Itter says. Thought I never would. Eventually, Itter did begin to work again as the impulse to make art in the form of a visual requiem for Lara returned. The resulting artwork, the Pink Room, was, as Itter herself remarked, a major departure from her other large-scale assemblage work. The Pink Room was more personal and emotional, engaging with the impact of deep grief and irreconcilable loss. At the heart of the Pink Room, installed at the Grunt Gallery, were 2 quilts, what Itter called low-relief comforters. In the Lara Gilbert phone, there's a draft of a letter Itter wrote to a friend where she describes beginning work on one of these comforters, which incorporated fabric copies of photographs Lara had taken of her childhood dollhouse, as well as small objects and toys from the dollhouse sewn in. So this is what you're looking at on the screen here is a detail from one of these quilts. Itter writes to her friend about Lara's wish to return to the land of Kawiaki, explaining her childhood fantasy was the land of Kawiaki. The dollhouse embodies a bit of this land. She adds, "The comforter has been good to do. It is a moving forward, something I haven't been able to do for so long now." In this letter, we can see, I think, how for Itter, making the quilt, working with Lara's things, was both a way back into her artwork and a way to work through her own grief and be connected to her daughter. As Itter has said, the comforters were low relief in both the technical and aesthetic sense, and in the sense of addressing and acknowledging the grief of Lara's death. As she described the low-relief comforter to her friend, Itter wrote that she had rough ideas for another 2 comforters based on her accomplishments, etc. These 2 quilts, when they were completed, incorporated many of Lara's records, copied onto fabric and stitched into the quilt's panels. In one quilt, titled Document, the copied records included excerpts from Lara's journal, her diplomas from high school and university, award certificates and report cards, as well as her birth and death certificates and notes from her medical files. In the second quilt, which Itter titled, "Oh My Good Mother," Itter sewed in some more of Lara's small objects and toys and assembled copies of artwork and cards. Cards that Lara had drawn for her with more excerpted journal entries. The Pink Room was first installed at Grunt Gallery in Vancouver in 1999. It was later installed again at Open Space Gallery in Victoria and then at the Vancouver Art Gallery, which now owns the work. In addition to assembling Lara's possessions and records in the low relief comforters, which were hung on the gallery walls, Itter incorporated Lara's belongings and words into the exhibit in other ways. A collection of her tiny things sat on top of a dresser beside a wall hung with photographs of Lara taken at all ages. In the installation at Open Space, the family's dining room table was included, and Itter has carved into it, I think, maybe carved into it, a passage of her daughter's diary. Two pieces created with fabrics Itter had collected, some passed down in her family from generation to generation, were titled Wedding Dress Never Worn and Descendants Never Born. The work, as she describes it, is a walk-in dollhouse loaded with memories, a space of what-ifs. In raising the what-ifs, the Pink Room was also intended to bring awareness to and public acknowledgement of Lara's experiences of sexual assault and of the wider social context of sexual abuse and its correlation to depression and suicide. Visitors could read resource materials about these topics in the dresser drawers in the Pink Room, and Itter also invited gallery visitors to provide comments and feedback in a visitor's book. Many of these comments attest to the work's ability to draw the viewer into Lara's world, into her childhood, to help the viewer to understand, to feel the impact of abuse. This is the records work of the Pink Room. By assembling Lara's records in the soft pink aura of the installation and in the soft material of the quilts themselves, Itter reconfigures these records, both official and personal, into intimate evidence of the impacts of abuse on Lara, as well as of her own love, grief, and care for Lara, as she attempts to comfort and protect her daughter from these impacts even after her death. The second archival intervention or assemblage I want to think about is the publication of Lara's journals. When Lara died, she left 20 journals to her mother with instructions that they be kept private until the year 2000. Itter suggests that Lara intended for the journals to be published, and there are references throughout them to this possibility. Lara seemed to recognize that her writing would outlive her. Carol was determined to see the journals published, approaching academic publishers who were wary of taking the project on, both because Lara was an unknown writer and also because of the harrowing nature of the contents of the journal. When she couldn't find a publisher, she determined to publish them herself, and did eventually, with the title I Might Be Nothing, taken from one of Lara's entries. In her introduction to the published journals, Itter writes, "When I first went to her journals and began the lengthy task of selecting passages and subsequently typing, I had to take time out every few pages to run out of the room in acute distress. Now, months and months later, I'm more collected in my emotions, and importantly, I am hearing her clear, concise voice as I go through the volumes of her writings. It is a gift." In this quote, we see again how records work. Sorting, selecting, and preparing her daughter's journals for publication is part of the way Itter finds to process her grief and connect with her daughter. Working with her daughter's journals allows her to hear again her daughter's voice. The impact of Lara's voice is what distinguishes I Might Be Nothing as an archival intervention. The journals center Lara's own telling of her story. Lara treated her journals as a confidant. Their pages provided a space for her to work things out. It was crucially important to Itter not only to let Lara speak for herself, but to project her voice into the world. Here, I'm reminded of what Anna Sexton's collaborator, Dolly Sen, has to say on the archives of mental health being primarily presented from the medical perspective. That, Sen says, is like lions representing birdsong in roars. Why, she asks, should the hunters give the hunted's history? Why should the people who have never visited a land be that country's prime historians? Whereas in the Pink Room, Itter incorporates Lara's records to tell the story of her grief and Lara's life through her own lens as a mother. With the journals, Itter creates a platform for Lara to speak for herself, also to speak publicly. Itter has separated entries into sections divided by years of Lara's life and adds an epigraph to begin each section. While the journals largely let us hear Lara's own voice, the choice of these epigraphs demonstrates Itter's gentle guidance. With a quote like this one on the screen, for example, she wants us to see how Lara's life was not entirely her own. She wants us to see again the impact of others' actions and to judge those actions before we judge Lara's. The third and final archival intervention or assemblage I want to look at is the Lara Gilbert phone at the University of Victoria Archives. The phone was chronologically the last of the three archival interventions that I'm exploring tonight, but the first that Alex and I encountered. A lot about the phone made better sense to us as we learned more about the Pink Room and Itter's work with Gilbert's journals. The Lara Gilbert phone at the University of Victoria Archives consists of Lara's journals along with correspondence, medical records, school records, drawings, other childhood records, and legal records. In the phone, one can find evidence of Itter's work with these records, including traces of her editorial work on the journals, such as annotations, underlining, notes about inclusions, and marginalia providing details about events or individuals in the records. One can also see traces of Itter's work with Lara's records during her creation of the Pink Room, with pink gels and cellophane from the installation still attached to many of the materials used in the making of the document. The phone also includes materials that Itter amassed herself after Lara's death, including records detailing her attempts to get Lara's journals published, as well as materials she created and gathered as part of her efforts to understand and reconcile, and especially to seek justice and legal recourse for her daughter's experiences of sexual assault and for the manner of her death. In the afterword she wrote for I Might Be Nothing, Itter states, "I have not been idle," and she describes her efforts to file reports with the Vancouver Police Department with regard, as she puts it, to the sexual offenses committed over a period of years on this child. She describes writing to the Federal Minister of Justice, to her Member of Parliament, and to the Attorney General, all in an effort to find out about, quote, accountability regarding an alleged sexual offender. She describes seeking legal counsel on numerous occasions and explains that should another living child, now an adult, come forward disclosing abuse by the same person, then the writings by my daughter can support that case considerably. With respect to the orderly who was acquitted at trial, Itter describes attempts to place his name on VICLAS, Canada's Violent Crimes Linkage Analysis System, and to communicate with the provincial ombudsperson about the need for a clear sexual harassment policy at Vancouver General Hospital. In addition, Itter obtained copies of all Lara's medical and therapy records, as well as the coroner's report and associated records from the coroner's office. She mentions meetings with the head psychiatrist at St. Paul's Hospital, their former family therapist, the Crown prosecutor of the sexual assault case in the BC Supreme Court, 2 investigating officers of the Vancouver Police Department, and with Vancouver's Women Against Violence Against Women. Well, she writes, the list goes on. There is evidence in the archives of all this work. The second accession to the phone, now described as the Carol Itter Sue phone, includes health and hospital records, coroner's records, records pertaining to Gilbert's therapy, records related to Itter's research on depression and suicide, to her attendance at grief support groups, and to her ultimately unsuccessful attempts to find justice through the legal system. Itter sounds tired in the afterword to the journals. She has worked hard, expended a tremendous amount of energy in a time of deep grieving, and achieved what amounts to almost nothing, legally speaking. The materials are packed up and shipped to the archives, set aside at the end of a long, failed process. Except to place the archives at the University of Victoria is not an ending. It is a safekeeping, and it is creating the possibility for justice of another type. Carol Itter was unable to get justice for her daughter in the legal system, but might the archives allow for justice achieved by other ends? The placement of these archives with the Lara Gilbert phone and not with Carol Itter's own phone, which will eventually be housed at the Belkin Art Gallery on the University of British Columbia campus, is a significant choice. Kept with Lara's archives, the records of her mother's efforts toward justice forever helped to shape this archival text as a particular kind of argument, an argument about what happened to Lara Gilbert, about who failed her and how her mother fought and fought and fought for her. The Lara Gilbert phone, like the Pink Room and like I Might Be Nothing, provides Itter with a means of wielding a certain kind of power, with a means of setting the record straight. She couldn't find justice for Lara herself, but in the archives, she creates the conditions under which someone else might continue this work for her. In this way, we might see the Lara Gilbert phone as a trial by archives. In our earlier work on records work, Alex, Devin, and I focused specifically on the ways that bereaved parents, in particular, used records as part of a grief process. Our article, published in Archivaria last fall, focused on what records work does for creators, how it helps them to come to terms with a loss, and perhaps more importantly, to continue a relationship with their loved one. In that article, we argued that recognizing this deeply affective and emotional aspect of record keeping and of the potential of records to continue the social existence of the dead required archivists to adopt a particular ethical stance in their work. We have joined many other archival scholars and practitioners, including especially Michelle Caswell, Marika Seafor, Jamie Lee, and Tanya Sutherland, in calling for an archival ethics of care that centers people and relationships in archival theory and practices. What this emphasis on records work, and in Itter's case, records assemblage, also surfaces is the need for attention to be paid not only to what creators do with their records, but to what they want those records to do in the world. We need to think more deeply as a discipline and profession about how archives, how the phone, can be assembled and deployed to achieve different and particular ends. We need to think more deliberately about archives as story, as text with something to communicate, as not just sources upon which to build an argument, but as arguments in themselves. In a talk she gave just last week as part of this same colloquium series, Jessica Lapp talked about the speculative and desire-based work of archive creators. In Itter's work, we see both speculation and desire. Speculation in the Pink Room, especially about the what ifs, as she called them, and desire throughout for her daughter, for what was lost, and above all, for justice. Does the creator's desire and speculation deserve more of our attention? I think so. And so do we need to pay attention to other intentions and motivations. Why, I want to ask, in a field that is in so many ways centered on the creation of records, are we also so blind to the many, many ways that creation does not result only as the byproduct of a creator's activity, the result of the usual and ordinary course of business? Everything Carol did was to tell Lara's story. These archival interventions matter. They deserve our attention. I've taken most of the time I have to make these arguments about the importance of better understanding acts of archival creation. I want to finish by acknowledging the importance of relationships to this work. In the nearly 2 years I've been working with and thinking about Lara Gilbert's records and Carol Itter's records work, I've come to care deeply for both of them. As I mentioned earlier, Lara's records were familiar to me in many ways. I feel like she and I could have been friends. And after meeting Carol in the summer of 2019, spending time around her table, talking, sharing stories, eating fruit salad she'd made for us and bread that I'd bring with me, I count Carol as a friend and have missed our visits over these last pandemic months. Grief, love, friendship. These are feelings, relationships, ways of being and knowing in the world which were never talked about in my own archival education, but which my research has shown me are often intricately imbricated in both how we create records and how we understand records creation. I hope this talk has suggested, if not yet ways to analyze and act upon the impacts of friendship, grief, and love on record keeping, at least the urgent need to acknowledge these impacts and to give them more of our attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. The The Q&A is now open if anybody would like to contribute questions. And maybe while we're waiting, I had a question I wanted to ask you myself, and I think your closing remarks really speak to it, because it strikes me that in the process of you doing this work, which I think is also archival work that you were doing with Alex, that there's another relationship here, and that's between you and Alex, who simultaneously had this experience together. And I was really struck that you mentioned Anna Sexton and Dolly Sen, who, you know, when Anna was doing her dissertation and she was also looking at mental health issues, Dolly was one of the people that she was working with from the in the mental health community herself, and they actually have co-presented a lot of the work, because Anna didn't feel that she could really speak on her own, because it was now an imbricated relationship. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that, and how that relationship between you and Alex sort of unfolded as you interacted with this font.
Yeah, well, Alex is an exceptional research assistant and colleague. And I think through the process of working on this project in particular, Alex and I think, hopefully she's not in the audience disagreeing, have also become friends. So I think normally in many circumstances, Alex and I do present together on this research. So we've presented on this research at the, just recently at the MLA Modern Languages Association conference. And then often also, because this has been part of a bigger project as well, there's other research assistants on the research team too that present as well. But I think in this project in particular, it's been very, very helpful to me to have someone to work really closely with too. I think in this case, being able to talk a lot about the records, about the research, to sort of think aloud with someone about the ethics of doing the work. Alex also has a background in art history. So she is, she understands all of the art and the sort of artistic process. And so that has also been really helpful. So I think most of our plans tend to be, most of my plans tend to include Alex as a co-author and as a co-collaborator, even as she moves on from being, unfortunately, not being my research assistant anymore.
I was also thinking about, there's a sort of web of affect that sort of mirrors the web of documentary relationships there too. And so you both experience something together, you know, and working with the font, and that is, it's more than a professional relationship. You're going through an experience, and doing it on your own is different from doing it with somebody else with you, and somebody else who's feeling the affect of doing that, I think.
Yeah, and I think I had wanted to talk more about the relationships between me and Lara in the records, and between me and Carol as well. But I'm still finding that I'm kind of working out how to talk about that. I think it definitely, as you develop a relationship and a friendship, it definitely changes how you approach the work, how you think about, you know, I thought really hard about everything I said in this talk, because I really wanted to make sure that I was doing justice to Lara and to Carol, and because I really care a lot about both of them too. So it does have a really profound effect on the work.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question from Marianne Diva, and she says, thanks so much, Jennifer. Looking at the pink room and the comforters, I wonder if you would care to comment on the relationship between the affect and materiality in this collection?
Yeah, I think materiality is in the context of the Pink Room is very important, and I wish I could have seen the Pink Room as it was installed, but in fact, Alex and I were able to go to the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the curators at the art gallery pulled everything out for us. So the Pink Room is currently stored there. Well, they own the Pink Room and they have everything stored there, and they pulled everything out for us and let us look at all of Lara's stuff. And that was a really profoundly moving experience. And it was the materiality. It was seeing and holding and touching these materials. Some of them we couldn't touch, but like the lace, the dresses, the wedding dress never worn, to see all of those old laces and all of those fabrics that had been collected, that Carol Itter had been collecting for years and years and years, and finally decided that this was the place that they would go. It is very, very moving. There were, I mentioned the tiny things in the Pink Room that were displayed in different ways in different installations, and those tiny things are now in little sort of drawer lockers, and to open all of those up, and they're just like the little things that a little kid collects, you know. It's a little kid's collection of stuff. And I think the fact that in the exhibit or in the installation, Itter invited people to go in and look at these things. Something that I didn't mention in the talk is that she also she made a whole bunch of little pink penises that she attached all over to the furniture that was in the exhibit. And even seeing the sort of like very homemade like way that those looked on all of these objects that are part of this home environment too, this little girl's room. Yeah, I think that the materiality is crucial. And for Itter, materials are what she works with, right? Like everything that all of her work starts with thinking about material. And I think the archive then is like that too, right? So the materials that she brings together into that space.
Thank you. We have another question. What steps can academic repositories take to ensure a right to privacy and being respectful to sensitive information, whilst also incorporating collection donors' intentions, especially with affect and reparative work?
That's a hard question, I think, still to answer. I mentioned that the finding aid for the Lara Gilbert Fond has been substantially revised since Alex and I were first visiting. And it includes a lot more information about Lara's life. The first finding aid didn't mention any of the sexual abuse. And it also includes a lot more information about the records that Carol's brought into the Fond as well. And I think that is it's good, but it's good to have this information. It's good to prepare researchers, and it's good to represent the materials as I think Carol wanted them represented. In this case, privacy is sort of an interesting question because Carol put the material in the archives so that it would be publicly available. But there's an interesting feeling as a researcher who knows a lot about those archives to read the new finding aid. And I know that the person who created it was really has done a lot of thinking around trauma-informed practice and was trying to incorporate these trauma-informed principles. But it's still it's made me think in a way that I haven't, or ask questions that I haven't answered yet. About sort of thinking about the rhetorical purpose of the archive, but also thinking about the rhetorical purpose of description. And and I think there are lots of questions we need to ask there around like whose voices should be in description. How do we use citation and description to, especially with you know, a lot of kind of fairly innocuous description, okay, but then when you start to have these claims that are in some ways very dangerous, you know, the sexual assault, the family sexual assault has never been proved in court. So it basically is, like I said, kind of being proved through the archive. So there's really, this is not, I'm not answering this question, but thinking about some of the, I think that the key thing with this case is that the intentions of the people who created the archive are being honored in particular ways. And that might be something that is more important for us to think about.
Thank you. And so our next question actually, I think, flows from that. It's a very personal and sensitive question. It says, thanks so much for this incredible talk. My sister took her own life at a young age, and we're left with all this artistic material from her short life. Can you talk about the issue of archives of people who are seen by their families as having had so much potential, when archives, of course, generally collect the materials of people who accomplished something?
Mm-hmm. I'm really sorry for your loss, Caroline. I hope I'm saying Caroline, I hope I'm saying your name right. Another part of this project, as another piece of this project, I've been interviewing parents, bereaved parents, and the parents I've been interviewing are parents of babies who were stillborn, about their record keeping practices. And of course, they have very few records because, you know, these babies were with them for a very, very short time. But often they engage in different types of records creation, and they think of these records that they're creating as records of their child's life as well. So I think that's another case where the potential is really palpable, right? And I think, you know, we have these concepts that Anne and Michelle have introduced to us too, around imaginary or imagined records. And in that work, I've been thinking a lot about the kind of way in which records imagine, you know, kind of are a way of enacting and embodying that potential. And it's also making me think a lot about why the archival field is only really interested in records that end up in archival institutions. You know, I think the question of archival creation and why people create records and why they use them and what they mean to them and how they help them is a really interesting one. And I don't know that we should limit ourselves to thinking about only records that will end up in a repository. So I think, you know, it could have been just as likely that Lara's wouldn't have ended up in a repository. And certainly the records that I'm looking at now, the records of the bereaved parents, I don't think there's any chance that those will ever end up in an archival repository, but I don't think they matter less. So I think that's kind of like a kind of existential question for the archival field too, of why don't we care more about the act of creation, separate from, independent from the act of archival preservation too.
Yes, and in our own personal lives, we may well encounter those collections too, because they're in our families and in our homes and our attics. And
yes, and I mean, my project started because of my own experience of loss and grief, and it was really kind of recognizing how records were important in so many ways to that experience and to processing and to remembering and especially to carrying on a relationship, right? The way that the records themselves, but also engaging in my own kinds of records work, were a means of carrying on a relationship. And that is really what's coming out in these records with bereaved, or these interviews with bereaved parents too.
indeed, indeed. We have one more question here. Can you think of a way for this kind of intimate work to be taken on as a career, potentially specifically with families who have experienced grief?
That's a good question. I don't know. Alex and I right now are helping Carol with her archives. I actually, there's a stack of boxes back there that is Carol's archives. And I think she's very organized. They're all in boxes that are labeled, and the files have labels, and there's really not very much for Alex and I to help her with. But I think the help that she needs is emotional, right? And I think when she knew that we were interested in Lara, not just interested in her, sort of we were genuinely interested in her and cared about her. And I think that is probably what kind of helped Carol let us into her records process too. And I think also she just wanted to get them out of her apartment. So I think there is, I suspect that there probably is work. I don't know who would pay for it is a really interesting question. I think there's work that records consultants could do in helping families organize and determine what to do with their records, maybe how to keep them for themselves. But I would be concerned that it would end up just being, rich people who could do that, and not, in this case, getting Lara's archives into the University of Victoria Archives. Canada has a really good public archive system. And also Carol was also helped a little bit by a professor at the University of Victoria who was doing a project on girls' diaries. So yeah, I think there could be a career in it, but I really don't know who's going to pay for it or how you charge for it either. I don't know.
Thank you. Another question. I would love to tell the stories of lost lives, but archivists cannot collect nor tell all stories, which I think is part of what you've just been saying. Did you face any barriers to tell this story by way of the collection development policies at your institution?
Well, I don't work as an archivist, so I'm not, I have no, I have no policies in sort of collection development policies. I don't think that I don't think that at the University of Victoria Archives, there were any specific collection development policies that posed barriers. But as I said, Carol did have some help in placing the archives from a professor in, I can't remember which department at UVic, who was doing a project on girls' diaries and used some of Lara's diaries in his project. And he kind of helped her hook into the UVic system. So so Carol had a little bit of an in, even though she, was trying to place these records of an unknown young girl. I think this is a question for professionals to think about in terms of collection development policies. And I think it's also a question that's tied to the question I was trying to raise too, about what do archives do? What are personal archives for? If they're there to represent important people, important people in your community, then, and your collection development policy is based around that, then those will be the kinds of records you collect. But if you want to think about the process of record creation or the different types of emotional work that records do, then maybe there's a different way of developing collection policies that let you focus on different types of records and different types of experiences and different types of creators.
Right. And we have one more question, which is really about self-care when you're doing this kind of work. So considering that trauma-informed archival work places archivists into trauma work vis-a-vis records work, what can we do as a profession to not only provide care for records creators or users, but also ourselves? What kinds of practices do we need to develop within the profession to support ourselves and each other? Do we need an ethic of clinical care for archivists, similar to social workers or mental health caregivers?
I suspect we do. And I don't think many of us who are teaching or managing in this field are prepared, like qualified to do that work, right? So I think that we do need to be thinking about how we learn from other professions and other fields. I think there's some really great work being done, for example, by Nicola Laurent and Kristen Wright with the course on trauma-informed practices in Australia. Those focus on helping, on having a trauma-informed approach to researchers and donors, but there's also really good information and help in there for archivists themselves. A third part of this project that I've been doing, a third sort of arm of it, has been talking to archival professionals. And I interviewed, I put out a call to see if anybody wanted to talk about grief and records. And I thought maybe 5 people would be interested. And I ended up interviewing almost 29 archivists. So there was a lot of interest in it. And the biggest kind of takeaway from those interviews was that the need to talk about it is really, really, there's a really strong need to talk about it. For several of the people I interviewed, it had been the first time they'd ever talked about any of these feelings any of the trauma or any of the difficulties that they'd experienced in their work. And so I think, I'm not qualified to provide a lot of this kind of care, but I do think one of the things I am qualified to do is to open space and make it more possible for people. The more we talk about it, the more people will talk about it, and the more it will need to be addressed. And we're already seeing this so much in the last few years, right? With the increase in writing on archives and affect, on radical empathy, on survivor-centered approaches to archives, on trauma and archives, right? So I think the fact that we've been having these discussions as a community, and Rebecca, who asked this question, was one of the first, Rebecca Sheffield, Anna St. Ange, and Melanie Delva did a panel at an Association of Canadian Archivists conference. The only panel at an archives conference where I've ever seen a standing ovation, talking about trauma, secondary trauma, and vicarious trauma in archives. So I feel like Rebecca has made some of the moves to open up that space too.
Well, thank you. I'm wondering, I think we've come to the end of our questions, whether there are any more questions that anyone would like to ask. Let's pause for a minute here. I think probably we've been grilling you for long enough. This is a fabulous lecture. I think it gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about, and many things that many people have not thought about terribly much before, and that I really appreciate that. I want to thank you for taking your time here this evening and taking time out of your family time to be with us too. I'm not sure if you can see the whole participant list, but there is one benefit to not being able to be here in person, apart from the fact that it's absolutely pouring outside my house at the moment. And that is that we've been able to have colleagues from all over the world join us for this lecture. And I'm so happy to see that, and to see your work move into all of those spaces simultaneously. So thank you so much, Jennifer, on behalf of the department and the school and all of us. And I hope that you're going to publish this as well. So
thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who came this evening, and again for taking time out of your evening and all of the other things that you would normally be doing at this time and your family time. We really appreciate it. So we will see you again next year at the next lecture. So thank you, everybody.